election coming up, and the president can't afford to have domestic political strife, especially one that can be exploited so effectively, like the Iran issue. You know what I'm talking about. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that all you need is a Laura Loomer to say 50,000 Iranian protesters were killed, and then in the minds of a significant percentage of conservative Americans, that becomes the truth. And then that makes it difficult for the president to act politically, because then there will be opposition from Congress. So the president does have an uphill battle to fight there. As I've said before, there's a deal in the making. I mean, if I were the negotiator, I don't want to toot my own horn, but if I were the negotiator, we'd have a deal. There'd be no doubt in my mind we'd have a deal. I already outlined it before with you. The deal is, a deal between Iran and Oman on the Strait of Hormuz, where the United States levers itself into the Omani portion. So whatever deal is bilateral, but it allows Trump to say, oh, I've got a modicum of control over the Strait of Hormuz that didn't exist before. And the other one on the nuclear deal is for Iran to basically take the deal that was negotiated by Oman on February 27th and was ready to be signed when the United States bombed on February 28th, to go back to that deal. And the way you sell is to say this is a better deal than the JCPOA that was signed by Barack Obama. And that gives Trump his political out. And with those two political outs, I think Donald Trump could withdraw and just deal with domestic political issues and leave the unraveling of the U.S. posture in the Middle East up to the next president. Because there's things you can do. First of all, we're not going to be able to automatically jump in and resume what we did in the past. We've suffered too much infrastructure damage. So, there's going to have to be contracts let. There's going to have to be contracts negotiated with host governments that may not be so thrilled about having us continue this relationship. There's monies that have to be allocated. And so there's a lot of things that can be done domestically, politically, where Trump doesn't have to say, I'm retreating from the Middle East. But the fact is we are retreating from the Middle East, and then let the next administration unravel that, shift blame to them. These are kind of political maneuverings that are possible if Donald Trump was a rational actor. He's not. So we just don't know what's going to happen.
How much is the Trump administration involved in supporting Ukraine in the ongoing war against Russia, Scott?
Not that much. I mean, we have, when the war first started, we go back to General Donahue, HIMARS was provided. In order for Ukraine to use HIMARS, we had to create a targeting cell in Germany. I think in Wiesbaden is where it was set up. And then at Mainz-Kastel was a more specific technical team. But for the HIMARS to be fired, especially in a way that allowed, because one of the key aspects wasn't just, having HIMARS fired, but having HIMARS survive. We didn't want to provide HIMARS to Ukraine only to have Russia destroy them. And so there's specific tactics that have been worked out. The Marine Corps has been developing these, land a C-130, get the HIMARS off, down, targeting data, fire, get back on, and fly away before anybody knows what happens. But that requires a specific targeting set of algorithms to be downloaded based upon where they are. So they'll pre-survey a spot. C-130 will land, they'll come out, boom, confirmed, data loaded, fire. And in order to survive, Ukraine needed the same thing, which means that the United States became the targeting authority for all HIMARS strikes. Now, I'm writing an article that talks about, well, wait a minute, does that mean that we tried to assassinate the mayor of Gorlovka in September 2022? Yes. Does that mean that we deliberately struck a theater where children were practicing ballet in November of 2022? Yes, it means exactly that, because they couldn't have fired those missiles without us. Donahue created a system. So, basically the United States would find the locations where they're going to fire. The Ukrainians would drive up to them, and then we would have received their target package, and then we approved that target package by sending the data. We called it points of interest, a point of interest. We didn't call it a target. But the data has to go in. It's specific data programmed. It's not just, people are like, oh, let's put it in my location and their location. No, it's got to communicate with a missile that's then connecting with GPS, and there's inertial guidance that's making algorithmic decisions on how to move guidance fins to guide it in. It's a specific set of codes that only the United States can do, and only a special unit in Germany could do. And so every target that Ukraine had was done this way. Now, that was early on. Then the United States started to reduce, start playing political games, cutting off intelligence. So what the Ukrainians did is they, together with Western partners, they replicated the targeting. Different kinds of data would be brought in, and then they basically replicated the code so the Ukrainians could do their own insertion of targeting data for HIMARS. And so today we know that the Ukrainians have some sort of self-sufficiency there. So when the United States says we're denying them access to intelligence, which we still are, the Ukrainians have workarounds on this, but it's still not good enough because the Russians have their own capacity to jam GPS signals and things of that nature. So it's not the intelligence information. The denial isn't as big a deal as everybody makes it out to be today, because Ukraine has worked a workaround with Europe and with it. They can rent commercial satellite imagery, and they do. It's about the weapons systems, and particularly the big one is air defense. Let's just make no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The PAC-3 missile is the only missile that works when it comes to Russia's ballistic missile capabilities. Drones, you can have other things work, but the PAC-3 is the only one that has a snowball's chance in hell of shooting down an Iskander. Virtually no chance to shoot down a Zircon or a Kinzhal. In a Reshnik, it'll never happen. But the PAC-3 did give them the ability to blunt, some of the Iskander attacks and then free up capacity to take on, the calibers and then the drones. They're out of missiles. They don't have any left. I think there was a 57 missile attack the other night. They fired one, their last PAC-3, and that was it. Last night there was an attack. There was no missile defense. It's all gone. And this is the end of Ukraine. If Ukraine can't defend itself, and it can't defend itself, that means that Russia will just run free. There's talk that Russia has brought in a North Korean artillery brigade that fires a Iskander M type analog, that up to 120 of these missiles have been brought in with this brigade, which means that Russia will never run out of firepower. And Ukraine will never recover. Donald Trump has not only lied to Ukraine about licensing of Patriot. Everybody heard what he said in Ankara. I'm giving you a license. Yeah, we have to go through this, but that won't be a problem. Well, it turned out it's a big problem, and they're not going to get the license. Then they came in and said, we need to just give us 300 missiles. Trump went, no, we don't have 300 missiles, and the missiles we have are going to defend us, not you. Nobody else has missiles. There's some in storage, but Europe's at the point right now where they can't draw down and defend themselves. And Europe right now is sort of seeing the writing on the wall that Russia's going to win in Ukraine. So Europe's no longer interested in throwing good money after bad. There's talk about building a joint, Freya, I think is the name of the Ukrainian air defense system, but they need components, they need parts. Right. That means they don't have a missile system. And if they did, they still have to produce it or assemble it. And, there's no air defense. So, wherever the Freya is built, it's going to go. You're going to see over time, I believe Russia is going to sustain the level and intensity of these attacks. They're going to take out the totality of Ukraine's industrial capacity and the totality of Ukraine's civil infrastructure in terms of distribution of goods, and et cetera, fuel, food, supplies. Why? Well, because, Zelensky stupidly allowed the campaign to open up and strike wild berries. I don't know what they were thinking. They get big fire, big flame, big smoke. Wow. Ooh. And that's it. Then everything gets destroyed. They were stupid to attack shipping in Azov, stupid to attack shipping in Caspian. How did Russia respond? Shut down the Black Sea. Ukraine no longer has access to the Black Sea. It's over. There's nothing the United States can do to turn this around. That's the reality of it. So the United States now, you're seeing we're starting to shift responsibility for supplying Ukraine to NATO, and we're walking away because there will come a Kabul moment. You know what I'm talking about, where Chris Donahue in the dead of the night was the last man walking onto a C-17 ramp as the last airplane flew out with the last troops because we got beat. There's going to be a Kiev moment where the last American leaves. It's coming soon. Ukraine, it cannot live. The president of Ukraine can have meetings where he says fancy words after fancy words, but the reality is there is no air defense. And without air defense, you can't survive. Without air defense, you can't do anything they're talking about. How can you build a factory to produce air defense systems when you have no air defense to defend the factory? Russia's already shown that it can strike anywhere in Ukraine at will. They're hitting Lvov at will. There's nothing Ukraine can do to prevent this from happening. So it's only going to get worse. And now that Russia's opened up the targeting deck because of the stupidity of Zelensky and his 40-day campaign to expand it to wild berries, life will become unlivable in Ukraine. Russia's not going to hit apartment buildings and things of that nature, but soon there will be no water. You can't live without water. Soon there will be no ability to distribute food because the distribution centers are going boom. There will be no fuel. Russia's destroyed 400 gas stations in the last several months, 200 permanently. The other 200 could be repaired if Russia wasn't destroying them again. And they're going to expand this. No energy production, no energy distribution, no industrial capacity at all, no jobs. A big one right now is no food. It's harvesting time. There's no diesel for the harvesters, none whatsoever. And if they harvest it, they can't get it to market. They can't distribute it within Ukraine itself, and they can't export it to make money. Up to 60% of the Ukrainian economy now is shut down. Ukraine is dying. It's a dying state. Russia's killing it as we speak. And there's nothing the United States can do to change this reality. Nothing. I'm still curious as to why Kash Patel is going to Russia in October. There's talk about him going in mid-October. Maybe this is a new direction because the one place that we have had connectivity back and forth is in intelligence sharing, security things. There have been tip-offs about terrorism and things of that nature, sharing of information in this regard. So maybe Kash Patel they're using, a vector that Russia trusts, because Russia doesn't trust Kushner and Witkoff anymore. I mean, Lavrov has all but shut the door. He said, they were never honest. And if you're the one who is, telling the lie, then that lie attaches to you. So Kushner and Witkoff, I don't think have any viability. I mean, will Russia let them in? I'm sure they Trump sends them to let them in. Will they get access to Putin? Maybe, maybe not. But will it be a quality conversation? No, because they're just not trusted anymore.
It has never been.
Well, there was always hope. There was always hope that they could deliver on the goods. But after Anchorage, they were exposed as absolute frauds, absolute liars. Kash Patel could come in and provide a new vector. So, we'll see. And look, as somebody who travels to Russia frequently because I want better U.S.-Russian relations, I hope Kash Patel succeeds because, again, a potential U.S.-Russian conflict, whether it's over Ukraine or over the Baltics or over the Arctic, the United States will be operating from a position of weakness, which means tactical nuclear weapons would be used early on, which means it's the end of the world. We don't need this. We don't want this. We don't desire this. What we need and want is peace. By the time Kash Patel arrives in October, I think the Ukrainian issue is going to be even more well-defined than it is right now. We see the Russians advancing rapidly against Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. We see breakthroughs in Zaporozhye. We see a reversal of the ill fortune that befell Kherson and Crimea. Yes, there are many drones. Yes, there still are many drones, but not as many. You got to ask yourself why, and the answer is because all the Ukrainian drone operators are dying. They're being killed. The Russians have flipped the script in terms of drone dominance. You can't drive in Kramatorsk today, the city, because the Russian drones are everywhere. They've pushed the ability for Ukraine to freely operate, and that's instant death. The moment Russia puts drone superiority, it's just a matter of time till they kill everything, stop all movement, and it's inevitable what comes next. And Ukraine's ability to push back, which they used to be able to do, Ukraine used to be able to surge 10,000 drones a day. I mean, imagine being a Ukrainian drone operator and having the ability to go fly, boom, fly, boom, fly, boom, fly, all day long, because endless drones. Not now. They go fly, boom, fly, we're out. Now I got to wait for resupply, but now resupply comes in, Russian drones detect it, boom, they're dead. Or they go out to recover a reconnaissance drone, get spotted, boom, they're dead. Most dangerous job in the world today is a Ukrainian drone operator, dying by droves. And the factories that used to be able to operate free of consequence are being destroyed by Russia as we speak. Every night, a new drone factory goes up in smoke. And so, Ukraine no longer has the ability to do that. They don't have manpower. They don't have trained brigades. They're losing men by thousands a day. Russia's not. So I think you're going to see a major reversal of fortunes by Ukraine on the battlefield. And as things get colder, as it starts to chill out, and there's no heat, there's no water, there's no food, you already see political desperation in Ukraine with tens of thousands of people in the streets demanding political reform. I don't think those people are going away. And I think as they start to get hungry, thirsty, cold, this could very well be the end of the regime of Zelensky. And the dream of Ukraine is finished. General Zaluzhny, who, in addition to being the former commander of the Ukrainian armed forces, was ambassador to Great Britain, the United Kingdom, a staunch advocate of Ukraine's membership in NATO and Ukraine's membership in the EU, has come out and said, we will never be part of NATO, we'll never be part of the EU. So what are you going to be? What are you going to be? If you can't be NATO and EU, what are you going to be? And he knows what the answer is, but he can't say it. You're going to be a rump agricultural state absorbed by the Union state. Ukraine will become part of the three sisters, Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine. But their status is going to be greatly diminished because they've lost the ability to, for the moment at least, I think they're not going to get Odessa back. They may not get Kharkov. They may not get Sumy. Who knows where the Russians will draw the line, but we'll see. I mean, that's not cast in stone yet. There were people who advocated, for a post-conflict Ukraine being part of the Union state, but noting that in order to be economically viable and not a drain on Russia and Belarus, that the Ukrainian state would have to have access to the Black Sea. But that Ukraine could never be governed by anybody who's tainted by the Zelensky poison. That would have to be a completely new government, Russian, handpicked by Russia, operating under the full control of Russia, because Russia can't allow a hostile or neutral Ukraine to have access to the Black Sea. The only way Ukraine will get access to the Black Sea if it's a subservient Ukraine or Ukraine that is, politically aligned with Russia. And that's the direction we're heading. It's a total defeat, potentially total destruction of Ukraine, and there's nothing the United States can do to stop it.
And you mentioned the case of the Black Sea and Odessa. Is Russia going to somehow isolate Ukraine from the border that they have with Poland? They have the connection. One of the main feeding lines is that railroad between Poland and Lvov, if I'm not mistaken. And they're using that line.
I don't do targeting for the Russians. The quickest way to get the FBI to come knocking on my door is for me to say, here's a good target deck, and here's why. But I don't need to. They have smart people. Andrei Elnitsky, former senior advisor to Sergei Shoigu, and who's Minister of Defense, has come out with articles written together with other very smart former senior Russian officers. He talks about 30 to 33 targets inside Ukraine that if you strike, it will destroy Ukraine. And those targets were always off limits. And there's a couple reasons why. I mean, he doesn't go into it, but I can speculate. Why is Russia taking the gloves off now? Because let's be honest, I thought Russia was going to take the gloves off 2 years ago. People were like, Scott, you've been calling for the end of Ukraine for a long time. Well, they could have ended it 2 years ago, militarily, doing what they're doing now, because this is the death of Ukraine. There's nothing Ukraine can do. Russia always had the capacity to exhaust Ukrainian air defense, always. You just have to do it over time. Flood it, get them to expend. You have more launchers than they have interceptors, and eventually you have dominance, and now everything happens the way you want. But there was always a political and economic question. The political question was, what will Europe do? And we have to be honest that 2 years ago, Europe was in a stronger position than they are today. That the big three, Macron, Starmer, Merz, were, they easily could have exploited any Russian aggression against Europe in a manner to unify NATO and to bring NATO in, which is the last thing Russia wanted. So Russia always avoided anything that could mobilize Europe, knowing that the longer you wait, the quicker Europe collapses. Well, today, Europe's in literally a free fall. In Macron's history, Merz, he's in a scandal right now that could cost him his prime ministership. And Starmer gone, and Andy Burnham coming in has no foreign policy experience, and England has no capacity whatsoever. So the concept of Europe intervening is absurd. But you don't want to be seen as the aggressor. And so you have to give Ukraine the ability to commit suicide. They did that a year ago when the Operation Spider Web. You remember that? The drones that attacked. Russia easily could have expanded the war then, but Europe wasn't positioned yet. Vladimir Putin is sitting there looking at the chessboard going, don't got my rook in the position I need now to make the aggressive attack against the queen. Let's just play some more chess. Well, today, Ukraine launched a 40-day influence campaign using drones on June 25th, attacking oil refineries. Well, oil refineries been attacked for years. They've never changed the outcome. They've temporary. People need to stop panicking. Gilbert Doctorow, stop listening to him. Look at what happened last year. This isn't the first time Ukraine struck oil refinery capabilities. Look at the panic that existed that the West was trying to engender over there. You know that the price of the top grade of fuel, AI 95 or something like that, today is cheaper today than it was a year ago today. Did you know that? A lot of people don't realize that. It's cheaper today. Now, wait a minute. I thought there was a huge crisis. I thought there were gas lines going up. They didn't have any gas. Russia's got gas. Russia does gas for a living. I always said, don't mess with if you're going to play the gasoline game, don't mess with a nation that's literally defined as a giant gas station. They know how to do this better than anybody. And Gilbert Doctorow knows that to be the case, but he still promulgates disinformation. Russia solved this problem. It's not a problem. Ukraine hasn't solved that problem. Shipping. They hit Azov Sea. They didn't do any damage. Understand that. Hey, Gil, look at the actual battle damage assessment. You might want to talk to a battle damage assessment officer, somebody with experience. That's me, Gil. If you ever want to talk about it, let's talk about it. But shut up about things you don't understand, because they didn't do any real damage to Russia in the Sea of Azov. They didn't do any damage to Russia in the Caspian Sea. What they did is piss the Russians off. So now Russia has shut down the Black Sea. You didn't see that coming now, did you, Gil? There's no access to the Black Sea for Ukraine. It's finished. It's over. Game changer. Russia's not suffering at all from any of this. They're winning on all fronts. Vladimir Putin has waited for the right time to do this stuff. He's a genius. And domestically, politically, again, I mean, Gilbert Doctorow can talk about his 80-year-old people standing on the hill and feed those who with bad knees who can't get down to the market because somebody doesn't have enough gas in a taxi to come up and get them. No one cares about that. That happens everywhere. Every day in Russia, there's old people with bad legs that can't get down to market. It doesn't change things. He's talking about relieving the general staff, General Gerasimov, at the moment of Russia's greatest victory. Because Russia's winning, by the way. I mean, even Doctorow can't deny that. Yes, they're winning, but they're not really winning because they're not winning because they're winning. He wants to fire the general staff when they're winning. Why? Because that would be disruptive and create the potential for a new 1917 or a new Gorbachev moment, which is what Dr. always wants. He hates Vladimir Putin. He wants Vladimir Putin gone. That's it. Not going to happen, Gil. The general staff's there to stay because they're winning. There are some shakeups right now. Take a look, a major shakeup in procurement and logistics. At the deputy defense minister level, there's some new blood coming into the armed forces. The Central Military District and Eastern Military District are getting new commanders. That happens. It's not the end of the world. They're still progressing. They're winning on all fronts. Vladimir Putin picked the right time now because he's exhausted Ukraine. They have no air defense. His defense industry is churning on all cylinders right now, pumping out missiles like you've never. Apparently, they have a lot of washing machines in Russia because all these missiles that required the chips out of the washing machine are flying and hitting their targets. So apparently, the washing machine production in Russia is just doing great, gangbusters. Didn't factor that in, did you, Gil? I don't like Gil Doctor. I'm just saying it right up front. I despise him. In fact, I view him as an agent of MI6, unwitting or witting, but Mikhail Khodorkovsky, the corrupt oil oligarch who fled to England, is currently operating a commercial intelligence business on behalf of MI6. Literally just published a whole stream of things that could have been written by Gilbert Doctorow because it's everything Doctorow has been saying. And that's the point I've been trying to make. Doctorow has been mirror imaging MI6 narrative for some time now. And it's dangerous. It's very dangerous because of what I just said earlier. See, I don't mess with, if it's just Gilbert Doctorow being stupid, let him be stupid. The consequences of his stupidity, though, are existential in nature. I told you right now, the United States is redoing its nuclear posture so that if we have a conflict with Russia, we will use nuclear weapons early. That's end of world kind of stuff, which is why we have to get this right, why we have to get U.S.-Russian relations right, why we can't allow artificial European-driven narratives to come in and influence the end. Fortunately, Vladimir Putin is 20 times smarter than Gilbert Doctorow ever was and will ever be. Putin's been playing this thing great. He now has the full support of Duma. There will be no disruption on September 20th. In fact, Putin's probably going to come out stronger than before. He's going to be in a stronger position. The military is going to be in a stronger position. The oligarchs are going to be in a weaker position. We're looking at a transformation of Russian society that has to happen on this time frame, by the way, because one of the greatest threats to Russia is the age of Vladimir Putin. Today, right now, Putin's untouchable. Don't care what Gilbert Doctorow says. Untouchable. Problem is, though, he's not God, and he ages out. And the system that he's built is a system that functions very well with him in power, but hasn't been tested about transitioning to a post-Putin world. And no one's really talking about this right now. Nobody wants to talk about it right now, but nobody wants to think about life after Putin. But Putin is thinking about it because Putin cares about Russia. I can't prove that Putin's thinking about it, except that he always says, I'm thinking about it. And he actually redid the Constitution on the